Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Let's try to cover two issues in the final 10 minutes. First of all, Ebola. I give you a full, detailed discussion of Ebola on the website. This was United Front Radio last Monday. But the main idea is austerity kills. Austerity is genocide. Cuts are killer cuts. The sequester cut $1.6 billion out of the NIH. And the distinguished head of the NIH, Francis Collins, said, we're losing a generation of researchers who are turning away from the U.S. federal government, going to other countries' private sector, doing things that maybe make money, but not curing Ebola. You get the idea. How about thanking Ted Cruz, the Tea Party demagogue, for whipping people up against the NIH and other big government programs? Here's another big government program, the Hill-Burton Act. The Hill-Burton Act in 1946, 68 years ago, said the U.S. should have 4.5 hospital beds per 1,000. Right now, Japan has 13 per 1,000, Russia 9 per 1,000, Germany 8, Austria 7 per 1,000. U.S. is sitting there at 3. So we're worse off than we were in 1975 when we almost got to 4.5. We have lost 1,000 hospitals. As we've stressed, we've got to rebuild 1,000 modern state-of-the-art hospitals. We've got to train 250,000 doctors. They cannot be crushed by student debt from medical school. This is where big government has to step in to save people's lives. I would point to Imhoff of Oklahoma as a genocidal saboteur trying to stop money from being spent on fighting the epidemic in Africa. Obviously, you want to prevent people who are sick from bringing the disease to the United States, but just as much, you've got to stop the epidemic over there. If you don't fight it over there, you'll be fighting it over here. It's like terrorism, guys. You understand that stuff. But in this case, it's actually true. Walmart has cut health insurance for their part-time workers, and the libertarians think this is the fault of Obama. I didn't see Obama in the Walton family owning Walmart. So the typical crackpot inability of the libertarian to see the crimes of the big corporations and, above all, the zombie banks who own them. Now, let's also look at the other interesting question of the week. On the Bill Maher program, the foul-mouthed comedian, Maher, Affleck, the, what can we say, airheaded Hollywood star, and the demagogic writer by the name of Sam Harris, and they want to discuss Islam. Well, the discussion they have of the Muslim world is distinguished by its ignorance, its superficiality, its radical anti-historical quality. So they want to blame ISIS on Islam and the Muslim world in general, and this is totally off the mark. Let's go back. There was a time when the United States was not the only game in the Middle East, when the United States was balanced very considerably by the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. This was, if you will, the period of decolonization, British and French getting kicked out, Soviets there as an alternative. This is where we see the Arab world, especially, making its freest choice. So what did they choose freely back in the 50s and 60s when this happier situation obtained? Did they choose ISIS or anything like that? No. They chose governments that would be secular, modern, modernizing, populist, interested in economic problems, building the Aswan High Dam, solving some of the worst problems of the Nile over millennia. Gaddafi with his great man-made river, the biggest civil engineering project of the previous decade, and one of the great works of modern civilization, certainly. So the people that they chose were Nasser of Egypt, Qasem of Iraq, Gaddafi of Libya, Hafez Assad of Syria certainly fills the bill, Arafat of the PLO, you'll see that. They're all secular, they're all modern, modernizing, populist, and progressive. Now, they're dictators, yeah, sure, because their countries are under imperialist siege and imperialist encirclement, and the U.S. is always trying to stage a coup. Now, the offer, of course, the Nasser offer was, well, let's have a reasonable, more or less equal to equal relation, and we can cooperate for the progress of all concerned. No, said John Foster Dulles. No, said U.S. governments, the British, the French, and so forth. And instead, they did what? They turned to the Muslim Brotherhood, as they had before. The Muslim Brotherhood is the matrix and the source for so much of the backwardness that these Maher and company are debating. What's the Muslim Brotherhood? The Ikhwan, created by British intelligence. And for what? In the 1920s, the Waft Party of Egypt was becoming gripped by anti-British nationalism. Kick out the British colonialists and occupiers after all those years, right? Sure. So the British come up with, no, the Muslim Brotherhood, that's not the main issue. The main issue is this other complex, right? The religious complex that you see. I would attribute modern Islam, or what is considered to be that. There are problems, this is for sure, but where do they come from? I would say from Bernard Lewis. Remember him. His work on Ismailism is that the essence of the Muslim faith is to be seen in the old man of the mountain and the cult of the assassins. So, remember, it was Bin Laden, the man of the mountain, the cult of the assassins, Al-Qaeda. Now we have Baghdadi, Caliph Ibrahim, the new man of the mountain, and now ISIS is the super cult of the assassins, all out of the Bernard Lewis playbook. Who's he? He's the British Arab Bureau. He is at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Another one is Wahhabism, Salafism, and Takfirism. Where do these come from? Oh, they come from the inside of Saudi Arabia, I guess, at a certain point. But I think the impression I'm getting is that they are not spread directly through the world from there, but rather the British Arab Bureau and its counterpart, the British India Office, decide that Wahhabism would be good to use for counterinsurgency purposes in India to promote clashes of the Muslims and the Hindus of India, and even the Buddhists, if any were left, but mainly those two, and that therefore the British would become purveyors of Wahhabism and Salafism. And of course, Takfirism, that's the common denominator. You will have seen Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran this week saying Takfirism is the device used by the imperialists to split the Muslim world. I think that's correct, and it's bad. And it's like if you went back to the U.S. tenure in Afghanistan, who did the U.S. support more than anybody else back in the 1980s? Hekmatyar. And why Hekmatyar? Because he was the biggest monster. He was the most barbaric and savage and destructive. That's unerringly who the U.S. is going to support. So how can you degenerates really sit there and say, oh, those Muslims, look, they're up, again, they're killing each other again, when the brands, the specific currents that are being used are imposed or fomented very heavily by your intelligence agencies. So always try to look in the history of a religion. They pick out the most degraded part and try to say that's the essence of the whole thing. And now, our point of view. Henry IV and Richelieu pointed out that religions have absolute claims. These threaten public order. So Henry IV, Protestant Catholic, and Richelieu Catholic say, look, we are not going to allow the absolute claims of any religion to tear society apart. They will be subject to the rule of the civil magistrate for law and order. No killing. Get the idea. That's the genius of the West, that there's the religious sphere and then there's the national state. These are separate. That's a very good way to go. It allows all religions to coexist. So we'll see you again next week on World ISIS Radio.